shifting to an equitable and humane society, that it's always going to be uncomfortable. But I think my biggest takeaway was that we really need to take a hard look at the language that we're using and how we're defining things like crime, because we have this whole myth and narrative around criminal activity and what crime is. But it's very odd to solve that because we're talking about this. We've labeled crime as this terrible thing, when in many cases it's just people trying to survive capitalism, trying to get by in the day-to-day when resources have been withheld from them. And so to call that crime is very twisted for me. And I'm very interested in, as we continue these conversations, to dig into the language and to analyze it and to create new words if we need to, but to really parse through the mythology of the stories that we tell about what safety is, about what crime is, about what care is for each other in a community, and find new language to move forward more effectively and efficiently.
Nice. Tonye, I've always seen you on stage. I've never seen you behind the microphone organizing an event like this. And so I was proud and pleased and struck by how well, and it's a real art. It's a real gift to be able to pull different ideas and different peoples together and open up a conversation. So I'm curious on a couple of levels. A, what was your takeaway? But what was it like for you being the band leader and pulling all of these people together?
Kelly's the one who pulled all these people together in concert with Michael. I was just the band leader, as you said. It was a lot more stressful than I thought it would be. I'm very used to coordinating conversations with people that obviously we have different backgrounds, we have different beliefs, we have different political positions, but this one was the first one for me that was so highly charged. So there was definitely a sense of, I had huge nerves around participating in this. But one of the biggest takeaways that I took from it is that people are ready. Some people, I shouldn't say all people, some people are ready to have deep conversations about what comes next. And I am ready for that all day, all day, all day. So the biggest takeaway for me was I actually left it with a sense of renewed hope and belief that we do all have the same goal. All of us want to be safe. All of us want to be healthy. All of us want to feel free and like we have access to the things that we need that make life livable. And it, like Kelly said, it's really just about coming to a shared language, coming to a shared place of understanding. And that night really left me with a hope that we're establishing a relationship. That's what this work is all about. You can't dictate these things. You can't just decide we're all going to be safe. Like, you have to make relationships with people in order for safety to flourish.
Because this program or podcast is called The Conversation Lab, and because it's my dissertation theme, I have to ask it, what gets in the way, in your opinion, of having deep conversations?
Trauma. People are traumatized in so many different ways. And unfortunately, at this current time, we don't have close to enough access to the things that we all need in order to deal with the root. Again, coming back to it, what's the root of all this stuff? I think that really gets in the way of people being able to be willing to have conversations. Like we talk about, Kelly and I talk about white supremacy and racism and colonialism and imperialism all the time. And we can have that conversation with ease. There's no one is feeling triggered, but there are many, many folks who are just not able to get there yet. And like, we're not going to change anything unless we can name the oppressions, call them out, acknowledge they exist, and make a conscious decision together to dismantle them and move past them. But there are some folks who are just not ready yet. I feel like that's what stands in the way, is people's own trauma, people's own inability to recognize the fundamental truths of like who we are, how we got to be here, why we're here, how messed up that is, et cetera, et cetera.
Michael, from your perspective?
I agree that we need to be trauma informed and culturally aware when we make any discussion. But the biggest one for me has been the fact that one of our tribal instincts as humans is being part of a tribe and being connected to a group. And I think right now there is two tribes that are really divisive in this conversation. And one of the things that really upset me about what happened this week was that city stated that to do this work, to put a framework together, would have to take away from decriminalizing the poverty motion. And what that did is it did exactly what I saw, what we did in the budget, where there was a motion to come forward to take 5 million from one group and put it to another without looking at the outcomes and without speaking the same language. It said take from one group, put to the other group. And when you've built up these two tribes that are in their camps and feel connected and speak to each other and are in these silos, and then we use language, and as a city we try to put one against another, it really makes it difficult. And I felt that this week really showcased that. I thought we moved a few steps forward in the conversation, and then that was a huge step backwards. And I appreciate Tonye was one of the first messages I saw on social media that said the community was not going to support this motion. And one of the main reasons was when staff had put forward that, and my intention, and I talked to staff before, was that we won't pit one against another. The goal is to look at how we can look at funding across the city and every department to improve community safety and well-being. Recognizing that last year I put forward that we'll start to look at a well-being budget and kind of model similar to New Zealand and other cities are doing, as well as the BC Indian Chief Association has put together a report talking about how we need to focus our budgets on a well-being framework, right? Recognizing that we need to look at how we as society now build from the bottom up, and we look at Indigenous knowledge and we take that into the way we create our cities. So in the budget process, I was able to do some of the shifts, but for me, the biggest issue I'm having is how do we bring people together to have this conversation? And I thought that there's a few speakers that were able to, at the end of the conversation, start to make that inroads. And I thought one would have been Theo Lamb, who talked about we might only have 10% in common. But let's focus on that 10%, recognizing that if we can make a safe bench at a bus stop and safe for the business owner and safe for the person who wants to stay there all day and safe for the person that wants to ride the bus, that's a better bus stop for everyone. And so sometimes we have to take it down to such a narrow, small level, because right now we are in our camps and it's difficult right now to have conversations between the two sides. And I think that's probably one of the reasons Tonye might have felt that the dialogue we had people representing both sides in the room. And I think it was great for them to hear the dialogue that happened. And I look forward to us having more dialogues, because I've had great conversations with people that called me the day after from both camps saying, I really appreciated this part of the conversation. I can see where we can walk that way a little bit. And so I think that's where we need to go, is recognize that the outcome for me is, like Tonye said, the outcome is for us to have a safer city. And what that perception of safety to me is just as important, because your mind actually really doesn't understand the difference between the two. So if you have had trauma or you've had an issue where you've been sexually assaulted, if you walk down a street and there's a similar person that's walking down, your perception of safety is important. And as a city, we need to recognize that we need to improve safety through so many different means. And I think right now, because of COVID, it's hurting so much. And like for myself, I know that people say things only change when a white person that's in middle class starts to be affected. And right now it is affecting me greatly. I mean, obviously we're in our COVID bubbles, but my mom gets stranded at work because her electric wheelchair gets stolen, right? She gets a COVID shot to get the vaccine and she cries hard because she felt like she's had the chance to kill her husband over the last 6 months, right? My stepbrother, who's on the downtown east side parts of his life and is dealing with mental health issues is having friends die from poisonous drug supplies left and right. Like my other brother's not wanting to raise a family and left the city. I mean, we're seeing it. People in my men's group are curling up in the corner of their apartment, scared to be near the balcony because they're so stuck in their mind because they haven't had community connection. I mean, we are struggling as a city, and we're struggling from every corner. And I appreciate, Don, when you said that the focus of the conversation was on one neighborhood. I'm hearing it from all over the city. We're struggling as a city. We're struggling as community, and we're struggling connecting to each other. And unless we start to have this dialogue, I'm nervous of where we're going. And I think that I really appreciate yourself for us having this dialogue today, and obviously Tonye and Kelly for pushing me to do what we did and for making sure that we do more.
I'm curious what the response was like from fellow councilors.
So totally mixed. Yeah. So right now, Lisa wants to work as we move forward on updating it, because obviously the motion's been pulled and we're updating the motion. And one of the things is she and me have worked a lot on mental health, right? She used to run the Kettle Society and has done multiple motions with me, as well as what we did with Oppenheimer on outreach and support. So she wants to see us on how we can bring in that lens, recognizing how important that safety is. We have a lot of young moms on our council that recognize what they're hearing from other moms around on how unsafe they feel in certain areas, and what we could do to put a gender lens on safety in the city of Vancouver. I think Carr is obviously right. She understands how important this is across the city. And she's the one that said, right, like the West End Community Policing Office has done this much, like call them up. Like some of the councillors reached out prior. I mean, I talked to Jean Swanson and Boyle and all others before we had our dialogue, because they all recognize that they're getting emails every single day on this topic. And so I think people want to have this conversation. They're just not sure how we can properly do it and what the best way forward is. Like Melissa Dijanova contacted me yesterday because she's talked about how she put a motion forward to have a public safety town hall. And council was really unsure about doing that because of who would be in the room, who was leading that conversation. And I think the conversation we had helped to showcase how difficult and how to make a safe room where people do feel as comfortable as possible is going to be very tricky. And so I think that's why that motion kind of got pushed to a side, but we do need to have that conversation. We do need to have the people from Safer Vancouver and other organizations in the room so we can have dialogue, but we have to find a way to make it that people can feel, oh, I guess it's difficult. People need to feel like they can voice their opinion. And even at our conversation, I had people that called me the next day, said they didn't feel comfortable speaking in that setting.
You're listening to the Conversation Lab, and we're speaking with Michael Weib, Tonye Aganaba, and Kelly Tatham. Yeah, I don't know. There are days I'm optimistic, and there are days I look at the city plan and I think it's magical thinking, and I hope it's not.
Yeah, I mean, I sympathize with you on that too. There's days that I sit there going, oh wow, we're going in the right direction. I went to 3 community meetings. I met great people doing great work, and then something else happens. And I go, I'm not sure we're going in the right direction as a city. So we're fortunate. When you're elected official, you get to go to different, mostly pre-COVID, I got to go to the most amazing meetings across the city. Every single night, there's dozens of groups meeting, and they're making the city better. Like, we are fortunate that we live in a diverse, exciting, unique city that has a creative industry that's fun and exciting. We have people trying to, right now, we have all these clusters happening during COVID of these companies and young entrepreneurs that are coming up with products and companies that are going to make this world a better place. And I'm excited that in the next couple of months, they're going to all start launching these companies. And I hope that we get on board and recognize we're going to be in a different world. And that world it's not going to be easy to get to. Great conversation yesterday with Hardwick that says some of her friends are feeling uncomfortable to speak in some of the advisory committees because they are changing. They are no longer a single group of people in the room. They are multiple people from different diverse backgrounds, and the conversations are more difficult. And what I'm happy to hear is that we are having more difficult conversations. We just have to find ways to take away some of the embedments in